The story begins with someone discussing the day the gates opened, leading to the world's downfall and the deaths of numerous humans. Silently, he takes one of the cartridges out of his pocket. Utilizing his abilities, he places the capsule into his mouth. The man asks if they are in their right mind. Goblin Shaman. Noticing the crystal near his foot, he says he should start by bending down to pick it up. Seeing this opening, the boss decides, attack him while he collects the crystal. Walk states that the goblin won't let that opportunity pass, because he's different from those stupid monsters. With a crazed smile, he states that the prey is helpless and that the boss must attack and reveal himself. Also smiling in a self-assured manner, the boss uses a magic and Opson breaks one of his talismans that formed the necklace. Sensing the source of the attack, the protagonist is very pleased. In the blink of an eye, the earth forms a kind of thorn-like barrier, piercing several goblins. On the other hand, back at the lodging, some lights were still on. A soldier asks the platoon leader if the ground didn't just shake. The leader asks if he's afraid and threatens to kill him if he wakes him up again. Something so insignificant, returning to the battlefield. Many monsters were impaled on the thorns, completely pierced through by the attack from the boss. Those who survived didn't understand what had just happened. From the top of the tree, the boss watched everything unfold, growling and confident in his victory. However, something catches his attention. The protagonist declares that he has found it, leaving the boss utterly terrified. He throws one of the swords that the monsters carried, spinning like a propeller, but the shaman raises his staff, intercepting the blade. He manages to defend himself, sitting atop the corpse of. Immediately after the judgment, everyone answers no. Junwook notices a status window appearing beside him. The system alerts him that he currently possesses 300 G of one of the monsters. Jinwoo laments, as that was his perfect throw. Enraged, the monster begins to laugh maniacally. The boss is caught off guard, but the protagonist declares it was a lie while expertly manipulating his bayonet. The shaman realizes the blade is coming too late, and a metallic sound rings out. It reverberates through the forest, leaving the corporal in utter disbelief at the sight before him. The boss had stopped the blade with his bare hand, though with some difficulty. He was holding the protagonist's dagger with his bare hands. He glares furiously at Junwook while wearing a smile. The protagonist admits to being surprised, since, after all, he stopped his attack with just one hand, and then stated that the protagonist was a waste. Finding no humor in the situation, the boss observes the boy as he continues. Holding his blade and preparing his rifle, Junwook commands him to lower it immediately, warning that he will cut them all down in a single strike. Looking around, the boy realizes that he was bluffing. He notices the crowd of monsters surrounding him and wonders what to do now that the boss is directly engaged in combat. Furthermore, this caused that the other monsters would lose their fear and feel invigorated once more. To his surprise, the system alerts him to his lack of mana, informing him that he used too much, and he only has 40% remaining. Junwook realizes that his mana is the biggest problem, and now that he has reached this point, he has no other choice but to unlock his weapon. The chief raises his staff, preparing to attack. Irritated, the protagonist shouts, declaring that if he can't devour it, they will both die together, and metal for manipulation. While chewing on the cartridge, the protagonist states that there's no way to be mentally stable if this is his second time serving. That even if it takes time, he will devour it and return it to its rightful place. The monster casts a glance and gives a terrifying smile. Suddenly, Jamo calls out to the corporal, frightened. The protagonist turns around, trying to find him. The boy keeps shouting, asking where Junwook is. Seeing this opening, the shaman orders an attack. The monsters rush forward at full speed. Annoyed, Junwook points his weapon at them. Junmu, frightened, screams as he sees the group coming to attack him. One of the goblins try to launch an attack, but the protagonist orders the boy to duck down. Doing as he's told, the boy crouches while the corporal fires. At the monster again, the creature tries to dodge, but the protagonist throws one of his swords in its direction. The monster manages to defend itself from the attack. Despite that, Junwook jumps on top of it, placing his gun in the creature's mouth and firing, cruelly killing the monster. The corporal lands right behind him. Trying to quickly rebuild his support base, he targets the remaining enemies. Surprisingly, there was no one else there besides him and his subordinate. The portal remained open, but there wasn't a single monster to be seen. His bayonet was plunged into the ground. In his mind, the protagonist concedes that he has lost. Enraged, he realizes that everything is more carefully planned than he had imagined. Suddenly, various screams begin to be heard over his radio communicator. saying that they heard gunshots, and that this is the fifth outpost to fall. Seeing that there is no way out, the corporal begins to report that a portal has opened, informing them that, suddenly, we see a fragment of a memory where Jun-wook was spitting up blood. That was a near-future scenario where he was lying on the 18. The monsters are goblins, and that they have retreated from the initial area. He glances at his subordinate, still somewhat irritated. The protagonist picks up his radio again, and announces that there are no casualties at the lodging. They report that they received his report, and that he must defend his post. The guy repeats again, that the fifth. Since he must defend his position, Jinwoo notices that they will arrive soon, as a stunning woman walks down a hallway. They report that they will be ready in 5 minutes for the emergency. It was the AMT Paladin, Lieutenant Ko. The protagonist assumes that, if she comes, just like in his past life, the woman will end up with all the monsters and the portal. With that, all the equipment will be under the army's possession, also recalling a legendary item called adamantium. This was the item responsible for making people know him as the Emperor of Steel, and if he misses this opportunity, the next one will be in 4 years, and if that materializes, he will suffer the same fate as in his previous life. Annoyed, he resolves to acquire the item first. Jun-wook insists that he needs it. Finish this quickly, before that team arrives. Remember, the goblins require a living sacrifice. The boy asks what's going on, as the protagonist tries to figure out where they went, realizing that for goblins who hunt in packs, the city is too densely populated, so they wouldn't be there, leading him to another conclusion. Over the radio, someone shouts that they're from Squad 6, and they've spotted goblins. Something glints between the trees, leaving floor as someone wearing a black plague mask approached him. The city around him was completely destroyed, and explosions were occurring and his subordinate completely surprised. Noticing this, the protagonist grins widely and shouts into the radio, identifying himself as Squad 5, and that will support the 6th. However, someone on the radio disparages them, saying there's nothing an F rank can do. They continue to insult him, but Jun-wook simply turns down the volume. Junwoo tries to stop him, saying that if he does that, he won't just be confined to his post, but will be tried in a military court. The protagonist says that the 6th is made up of archers and mages, meaning there's no one specialized in close combat, but the boy asks what will change if Jun-wook goes there alone. Pointing at the boy, the protagonist says that he isn't alone, since he has him. Juno is left confused upon hearing this, and asks if the corporal heard him correctly. Some people from the 6th were calling for help, saying that Corporal Leon K had been shot down nearby. From the outpost, dozens of goblins were attempting to invade. A soldier tried to protect himself, asking if his corporal was all right. On the ground, the corporal reports that he won't be able to maintain the barrier for much longer, prompting his partner to desperately call for help over the radio. Confused, they wonder why it had become so quiet outside. Some stones were floating in the air. The shaman was casting a spell, launching several fragments of stone. Trying to defend themselves, they wonder what it is this time. They both realize that this is a monster, and after it destroys the outpost, they will be captured and taken to the piles of bodies were strewn across the streets. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people were piled up like mountains of meat. Smiling, he says that in the end, altar to be sacrificed, where their hearts will be ripped out while they are still alive. The corporal points his rifle at his own face, while his companion attempts to stop him, but he insists that ending everything now is less painful. The boy cries as he watches that scene again. Various stones were floating above the outpost. The boss prepares another attack. Someone speaks over the radio, saying that they will help him from now on, and to do that, he must charge his arrow with fire and aim towards the light. He repeats the instruction, asking the boy to charge his arrow with fire and aim for the light while doing as he was asked. He says that he needs a whole unit of archers like him to be able to fight. The soldier continues, desperately asking what he should do while watching the wave of stones coming in his direction. The boy claims that he can't see what he's aiming at, questioning who or what he should shoot. However, he finally sees a light between the stones. The protagonist was on top of one of the goblins with the flashlight on, asking the archer to simply point his gun at the light. Jun-wook says that he will be the one to control the trigger, and with that, he gestures with his finger as if he were firing the crossbow. The guy really freaks out and says his trigger moved by itself. The flaming arrow passes through the stones, hitting the monster squarely. The monster that the protagonist was holding attempts to pull out the arrow. However, an explosion occurs, killing the goblin. The system warns that, after all, it wasn't the monsters who destroyed humanity, but the players themselves. The person begins to remove their mask while he used 1% more of his mana. Happy, Junwook states that this way he can save his mana, surprising everyone. They hear something terrifying. The shaman was observing from above. He begins to manipulate the stones once more, hurling them downwards. The protagonist leaps away, narrowly avoiding a massive attack. A trail of destruction remains in the wake of the boss's attack. The archer was still frightened, but Junwook commands him to reload and take aim again, towards the light. The boss was positioned on a cliff, observing the entire situation unfold. One by one, the goblins were falling to the coordinated assault of the protagonist and the archer. Witnessing the situation, the shaman grows increasingly enraged. Deep within the dark forest, Junmu wondered how a soldier like himself could possibly locate the boss, questioning whether he would simply die the moment he signaled. However, before him lay a battlefield engulfed in burning goblins. Thanks to his corporal's incredible strategy, the boy notices that Junwook had told him he would distract the monsters. But at this rate, they will finish him off. Portal all by himself. Suddenly, a monster notices his presence and tries to attack the soldier. Junmu is paralyzed, unsure of what to do, but luckily for him, the protagonist repels the monster's attack with his dagger. Positioning his flashlight, he heads toward the creature. With that, Junwook activates the trigger again. Another arrow hits another goblin. It burns in flames while the protagonist quickly passes by the soldier. Silently, he points in a. He asks if that is the last hero, the Great Steel Emperor. Removing the mask, the man with red eyes denies it, saying that is just Junwook. Direction. The boy obeys his orders, saying that the rifle will go to his position. Junmu again wonders if this is really his corporal. The boss was watching, destroying all of his subordinates. Junwook states that this should be enough, as he looks at the status window, wondering if that coward will finally appear. Reaching another conclusion, the system alerted him that it only had 2% remaining, and that he should keep that in mind. Somewhat irritated, the protagonist, he realizes that the boss is waiting for this, admitting that if his mana runs out, it will be the end for his companions. But at that moment, someone calls out to him, begging him to save him. As the shaman uses Juno as a hostage, the boy says that he followed all of his orders and apologizes profusely. Without saying a word, the protagonist uses his bayonet. However, the chief brings the sharp end of his staff even closer to the soldier's neck and begins to say something in the goblin language, Junwook. It infuriates him greatly. He deactivates his metal manipulation as two more goblins approach from behind. Apparently not resisting, he says that this is all Juno's fault. Both goblins jump and try to attack him. With a smile, he points his finger at the boss, saying, "This is checkmate." He moves his finger again. His subordinate's rifle, which was aimed at the boss, pulls the trigger on its own. The gun begins to fire frantically, causing the monster to release the boy. The shaman spits out blood while feeling horrible pain. The corporal dodges the attacks as he heads towards the boss, his soldier, an F rank. As he opens his arms, the man declares that the protagonist doesn't understand that they are divine creatures who judged humanity. Enraged, falls next to the monster. The boy confirms that he is okay. Extremely satisfied, the protagonist says that, in that case, he should have a good appetite, throwing his spinning dagger at the boss, who desperately tries to run away. But when the blade hits, the skin he's wearing repels the attack. Again, the system alerts him about his mana levels, reporting that he only has 99% left. Attempting to attack again, Junwook wonders why the monster. He only protected his back. The shaman, consumed by fear, tries to reach the portal, struggling harder and harder to escape death. Sensing the plan of his enemy, the protagonist throws his bayonet, asking if he wants to go to the portal. Junwook shouts as he runs quickly. The monster was far away from him and extremely close to the portal. The creature extends its arm, trying to escape, but its necklace suddenly glows. With that, the protagonist, he realizes it's metal, and the system alerts him that he only has 7% remaining. He extends his hand, palm open, and quickly closes it while pulling backward. This is how he manages to stop the boss, even with his mana nearly depleted. With no other options, the protagonist pulls even harder on his enemy's chain. The boss couldn't do anything to stop him. With the monster finally immobilized on the ground, he throws his dagger to deliver the final blow. His mana drops to 1%, as he cries out for it all to end, striking the monster's head. The impact was so strong that even the ground trembled. His mana finally reaches. Junwook says that they are not divine beings, assuring him that if he had known how to become stronger sooner, he would have defeated them easily. Opening a wide 0%. Gasping for breath, He sees that his abilities remain the same, but this body is far inferior compared to his previous one. Suddenly, a strong glow appears. It illuminates the place, and he realizes it's the holy light. He notices the emergency team has arrived, and that a woman is there, looking desperate. He tries to find the object inside the monster's body. Finally, he locates the jewel and removes it with a certain amount of disgust. Someone shouts, announcing that they have entered the portal. The soldiers order him to raise his hands, or they will shoot him. With no other options, the boy puts the entire crystal into his mouth. They ask the protagonist to identify himself, including his name and rank. With his mouth covered in goblin blood, he turns around and identifies himself as Corporal Jum Walk. They state that they found an injured person and request a stretcher to carry the protagonist away. The soldiers remark that, because the portal is still open, there must be some enemies still alive. One wonders, while observing the bodies, if 4 common soldiers could really defeat a boss. He assumes it's not exactly like that. They all have similar injuries, noting that this really is the work of a single person. The system congratulates him, but also alerts him, saying that now the metal that was being absorbed will have a delay and will need 9 hours while it is being transported. He smiles, realizing it was worth it. The system says that the metal is enchanted, and he will receive abilities accordingly, along with an unknown amount of grams. Observing the protagonist, the lieutenant, helpless, a small fraction awakened supernatural powers. These individuals were then named saviors, also known as players. The protagonist is part of V. Smile. The man asks if he is frustrated, saying that even if the protagonist were able to become stronger, the outcome would not change. Jum Walk wonders how that man could be laughing at a time like this. The system congratulates him again, informing him that after consuming the object, the legendary power will allow him to detect all metals within his range. Surprised, he declares that he has finally returned. A soldier warns that 2 goblins are racing towards the 6th outpost. Un quickly brandishes her sword and notices that she can actually feel the resonances of the metals around her. Raising his fist, Junwok declares that today was the day the Great Weapon Emperor finally returned. Some days after the incident in the 3rd Brigade of the 1st Battalion, some soldiers were discussing the rumors surrounding Rank F. They commented that, according to the rumors, some soldiers were waiting for death, but a Rank F corporal appeared and massacred the goblins. One of her friends says that's just a fantasy, as such a thing wouldn't be possible. Meanwhile, someone else was vomiting. It was Sang, who angrily questioned if they really expected him to believe that. A soldier giving the Sang military salute assures him that it's true, while another man asks him to speak more quietly. The fat man leans on the boy, saying that the sergeant didn't accept the greeting, and yet Anil is fearfully lowering his hand. The soldier salutes again. It was the archer whom the protagonist had saved. The sergeant asks the fat man's name. He introduces himself as Wook Sok. He orders him to take 3 other boys and head to a portal, but he refuses, saying that he cries while glaring at his opponents with extreme irritation. The madman declares that someone useless like him, an F rank, is destined to die in such a manner. It's impossible. The sergeant states that he's never seen ordinary soldiers defeat a horde along with a boss, so he believes it was just a stroke of good luck, and if that's the case, a disobedient F-rank soldier poses a danger to military discipline. The fat man starts laughing maniacally while squeezing the boy's head. Sok still tells Anil that they can't just leave him like that. Back at the protagonist's accommodation, there were several doors in a strangely white hallway. Inside the battalion commander's room, someone greeted him. Junwok introduces himself, stating that he is there to resolve a troublesome matter. He wonders internally if everything went well, and if that's the case, there's no reason for him to have been summoned. The lieutenant, a rank B paladin, was also present. At her side was Lieutenant Mani, a rank C mage. The commander asks if it is true that he disobeyed his orders to stand down, questioning whether he faced the first portal horde, which turned out to be Ko-si, also known as the King of Namsan Mountains, a rank B. Jin-woo mentally notes that if he says something incorrect, this could end up in a military court, and he just wants to remain on guard duty. The protagonist confirms that this is true, and that, after the portal outbreak, he responded immediately. The commander comments that someone like him in that situation would have been torn to pieces. The protagonist thinks that the pressure really is incredible, and if he has to go back there in the future, his military life will be ruined. He sketches a slight. Either way, the man retreats, saying that this is the most fitting end for someone like him, as a large man raises his hammer to smile. Jin-woo expresses that he feels unfairly treated and deceived by the battalion commander. The Ichigo of March 25th asks how the protagonist dares to say that, but Kok, surprised, tells him to shut up. Min-hee returns to her place, still looking at the protagonist. The commander asks about why the corporal says that he always says something whenever he trains them, something that never fails to happen, and asks if Kok doesn't remember, recalling that he always says that if you are part of the Anti-Mon, and it doesn't matter if you are rank A or even E, you are capable of defeating trolls. He says that, according to the commander himself, someone of rank F, like him, might have difficulties facing a troll, but not a goblin. To complete his thought, he says that if he had not disobeyed the control center's order, all the soldiers at the 6th outpost would be dead. Mentally, Junwoo assumes that was his rational attack, and that now he will attack emotionally, remembering another speech by Coke, where he stated that for a true soldier, ranks don't matter, they fight with all their strength. The protagonist begins to say that, as a true soldier and as a follower of the commander, a person he deeply respects, he put into practice the tactics he acquired through rigorous training, and that he only endured his military life, even as an F rank, thanks to the admiration he feels for the commander. To see him despise his efforts is as if his military life meant nothing. Around the time Xeo was commissioned as a second lieutenant, the portals were opening, and he almost died. Finish him off. Before being struck, Jun Walk shouts the man's name, calling out Gordon. Praz then reports that this was how he died, and that he did not expect to. In a fight against orcs, however, without even a moment's hesitation, he returned to the army and became one of the first members of the troop. Anti-monsters, in other words, he is a true warrior. The protagonist recalls telling him that he admired him and that he risked his life for his companions. It wouldn't make sense to send him to court. The commander grabs him by the arms, asking if that is truly what he believes, and addressing him as soldier. With some trepidation, the protagonist states that his name is Jun Walk. Suddenly, the commander asks him to become his non-commissioned officer. Abruptly, the system congratulates him, announcing that the absorption is complete and that he has acquired the skill of physical transformation. Both the protagonist and the commander stare at each other without saying a word. Both lieutenants appear somewhat embarrassed and surprised. The commander even has tears in his eyes. While nodding, Jun Walk, on the other hand, was breaking out in a cold sweat, a mixture of fear and amazement washing over him as he stared at Kok, unsure how to react. Wondering if he had misheard, Jun Walk later found himself in the training room of the 1st Battalion's 3rd Brigade, where he usually trained. Calmly placing the weights back in their place as he catches his breath, he assumes he's in trouble for trying to avoid guard duty and the military court. The fat man and the sergeant were watching the protagonist, Sok, seemingly plotting something, and then he gives an order to the fat man. Jun Walk then remembers Lieutenant Min-hee, return, like in web novels. The system congratulates him for discovering how to increase his strength, and that in 10 minutes, the medal will be, telling the commander that an F rank had never become a non-commissioned officer. The protagonist thanks the lieutenant for buying him time. In the end, it's for the best. Living like a mouse, trying not to attract attention. Now, Bon-suk approaches, asking if the corporal is finished using the bench, but Jun Walk replies that, not yet. However, upon closer inspection, he notices something, the strange smile plastered on the fat man's face. Jun Walk asks what he's plotting now. Bon-suk says that seeing the most famous person at the moment, using only that weight, would be a disgrace to their unit. Several people present look curiously at the situation. The protagonist notices a specific group of people laughing. He realizes that it's the sergeant, and that he probably planned everything, wanting to humiliate him. While everyone mocks him, Jun Walk says that if he avoids them now, he'll be bullied like in his past life, which he assumes he doesn't want. Draw too much attention to himself. But if that's the case, he tells Wook that he arrived at the perfect time. He calls out the fat man for a fight, leaving both Sok and Wook. Surprised by that, everyone starts saying that 2 soldiers are going to fight. Finally, they were inside a fighting cage. Calmly, the protagonist put on his gloves. Not much differently, Onuk did the same. The big guy says it's time he learned a lesson. He runs at full speed towards the forter. Protagonist, attempting to punch him with his left arm. Elsewhere, someone asks how Choi Jong-hon managed to get time off for vacation. A man, absorbed. The manager announced that he would fix their minds, and that after he said 1, everyone had to say soldier. If he said 2, they had to shout mentality. Comments that he was excited to learn that Choi Jong-hon had the potential to become a sword saint. A soldier tries to calm the non-commissioned officer, saying that Hongo is considered the ace of the moment, but the possibility of another ace appearing in the future piques the man's curiosity. He comments that seeing the first lieutenant go there, only to there and leave empty-handed is a little disappointing, and he asks her to accompany him. Meanwhile, back at the fight, the protagonist was dodging one of the attacks. He plants his leg firmly on the ground, ducks low, and avoids another blow with relative ease, managing to evade all the attacks. However, Junwook ends up cornered against one of the iron bars. Quickly, his opponent rushes toward him, launching another powerful attack. The protagonist is surprised by how the situation is unfolding. People predict what's about to happen and become frightened, surprising everyone. Junwook rolls. He hits the ground, but escapes the situation. Skillfully, he rises to his feet and positions himself behind his opponent, gesturing with his fingers for his adversary to hurry up and attack. The big guy becomes extremely irritated while watching the fight. Some people begin to cheer them on. Anil comments that it's as if the stage has been set, so that Mr. Myeon Cho could see it. He asks the lieutenant for his opinion, pointing out that Wook's blows are apparently very powerful. All while he continues watching the fight, the man notices the speed of the attacks and how the opponent manages to dodge each one. He wonders what the ultimate goal is. As he struggles to maintain his stance, Junwook states that he has returned to the past and his skills have been reset to their initial level. The man begins. He can't even manage to land a single blow on his opponent. Anil responds that it's because he is inexperienced, and that if he manages to land just one hit, it will definitely be a knockout. Sergeant Sang was furious. He shouts that Wook is very uncoordinated and orders him to get himself organized as quickly as possible. Many people begin shouting and asking if he thinks a fight is a game, and they tell him to take it seriously because they are betting on him. Mentally, the big man thinks that his body is extremely heavy. He tries to attack the protagonist again. However, the reason for this is that his boots, which have a bit of metal, are being tether or metal, controlled by Junwook. The protagonist gestures with his hand, assuming that, thanks to his power to control steel, he pins his opponent's leg to the porous floor. The man completely loses his balance. As if he expected it, Junwook dodges the blow again. The big guy starts to go crazy, not knowing what is. It's happening, and the protagonist realizes that, for Won-suk, it's like fighting in a swamp. With a sadistic smile, the protagonist stares down at Won-suk. He asks her to wait, and starts commenting that her legs feel a little strange. Junwook asks why she's bringing that up all of a sudden, and with a smile, asks if things are now. They are not in his favor. Irritated like a bull, he insults the protagonist while saying that Junwook is just an F-rank hunter. With that, he uses his ability and unleashes a strong shockwave. Both Il and the first lieutenant are curious about what's happening. Suddenly, Wook goes into berserk mode, strengthening his body significantly. His eyes, shouting, "Number 1, and then number 2, repeating this several times. After that, they were in another location, conducting a head count. The manager, they glow red, and the veins on his forehead bulge. The protagonist clenches his fists, moving his hand, and enters a combat stance as he watches intently. Mortally injures his adversary. Note that with the physical enhancements, they are no longer in the realm of sparring, but even so, his opponent didn't back down. It's like a real fight, between an enraged buffalo and a leopard, with its claws hidden. The big guy looks extremely large and imposing. The lieutenant comments that this is fun, while the madman says that he already told them Wook was not a joke. The man assures Junwook that he will finish everything right there. Suddenly, he disappears from sight, launches a powerful blow against the protagonist with crushing force. Junwook is sent flying into the fence. The sergeant celebrates, saying, "That's his guy," and others state that it was predictable. After all, he's on another level. They say they don't call him the ace of the future for nothing. Wook feels a pain in the doll comments that it's as if he struck steel with his bare hands, and to everyone's surprise, the protagonist was standing without a single scratch, having activated his steel body ability. With a smile, Junwook says he turned a part of his body into metal and assures everyone that this time he will take revenge, ordering the pig to come at him. The Trenbolone calls the protagonist a useless F-rank and tries to hit him again, but the protagonist easily dodges. Jum W comments that using a skill like that against someone like him is a waste, but he still prepares his skill to unleash was coordinating the troops, ordering the second squad of the 3rd platoon to move in. Extremely bored, the protagonist reflects that he never imagined he kick on his enemy, hitting him hard in the leg. While throwing a punch, he says that guys like Bon Suuk, who think they are so strong, deserve a good beating. It's always the cure, leaving everyone speechless. The protagonist starts beating the big guy on the ground. Even the sergeant is impressed with what's going on. The lieutenant notices that he finally showed his claws in an extremely humiliating way. Junwook was hitting Wook. Momo comments that the leopard finally bit the buffalo's neck, and if he really is a true beast, he won't have any reason to let go of his prey's neck. He has to cut off his breathing. However, Wook lifts him up with his arm, preparing to deliver a massive punch. With his face completely beaten, he says he doesn't know what the protagonist is using to cheat, but either way, Junwook is a little scared. Looking at his opponent, the big guy yells, saying that he should just die as he throws him to the ground. The corporal is genuinely terrified and fearful, but twists his body alongside his enemy's arm. Inevitably, Wook feels tremendous pain. His arm is extremely close to the ground. The protagonist had applied a submission hold to his enemy, leaving him completely immobilized. The big guy recognizes that attack as a flying armbar, and comments that if Wook were to slam him into the ground with that punch, he would break his own arm. Realizing that he has good reflexes, Junwook was struggling to maintain the hold. The lieutenant notes that a normal person does not would return there. Even a cat received food before they did. The sergeant calls for the support squad. Junwook introduces himself as a corporal, but the man says, could face a barbarian with body strengthening, and wonders about the super boost. Bonsuk says that, apparently, the protagonist, he is fighting for his life, desperately trying to land a punch. Trenbolone questions if Junwook really thinks he can crush his arm like that. The boy, he continues screaming, squeezing his hand even tighter. In genuine pain, the large man insults him while feeling intense pain in his fingers. He opens his hand to unbalance the protagonist. However, he attempts to throw a punch, but Junwook somehow manages to dodge it. He quickly twists and contorts himself towards back, using the enemy's head for leverage. In a matter of moments, he was already applying a rear naked choke to Bonsuk. He quickly positions himself to finish off his opponent. The lieutenant celebrates, realizing that his expectations were correct all along. After all, body strengthening alone, it improves muscles, and it's possible to compress his artery. Wook says he just needs to use his strength at that moment. The protagonist begins to smile. Again, he uses his body transformation ability while being strangled by Junwook. The big guy wonders how his strength isn't even enough to, not even his strength can get him out of this situation. The system warns that he is using body transformation in an area larger than his current limit. With this, the protagonist begins to feel several shocks throughout his body. Again, the status window warns that excessive use of the skill can crush this small group as an F-rank player, the Great Steel Emperor, known as Junwook, the last savior of humanity. However, that they need to do something else first. Exhausted, the protagonist complains that they just finished training. With a smile, the man asks if anyone, the user's body. One of the people who was watching asks the sergeant if they shouldn't stop it. After all, the big guy never surrendering. The protagonist was suffering greatly from the skill's penalty, while Mirai Sunguk observes that this should be sufficient as a warning. The sergeant nervously watches the scene unfold as he struggles to break free. Wukong can't believe that he's going to lose to someone like him. Protagonist. His vision starts to darken, and he wonders if he'll be humiliated in front of everyone, but he mentally declares that he is the future ace, growing even bigger and angrier. While suffering greatly from the penalty, Junwook becomes even more frightened by his enemy's immense strength. Guy grows so much that he begins to tear his own clothes apart. After a massive burst of strength, the madman becomes extremely gigantic, causing everything around him. The area began to crack, and both he and the protagonist were at their limits. With a strange expression, he wonders who will emerge as the winner. After all, there's no point in becoming larger if you can't escape a rear chokehold. Which of these two will prove to be the true predator? They both screamed, searching for strength from any possible source. However, Wook's face begins to turn extremely red as he clearly starts to lose consciousness. He collapses, causing a huge impact that forces everyone to shield their faces. Without exception, everyone present watches the unfolding situation in astonishment, mentioned the training and calls Junwook a loser, but the boy says he forgot about it. Sok, the scum of the army, approaches the protagonist situation. With that outcome, the lieutenant declares that Junwook, seen on top of his opponent's body, is the true predator. He notes that he is a true wild beast. Someone approaches, asking if Wook is all right. Some people were trying to see if the large man was still alive because of his size. They didn't know how they would carry him. Juno runs to the protagonist, saying that she was sure he would win. Even though Jun Wook tries to stop him, the boy continues, asking if the corporal is injured. The corporal looks at Sang-guk, who immediately averts his gaze, clearly upset and concerned by everything that had happened. The lieutenant approaches and asks for the protagonist's name. He immediately introduces himself as Corporal Jun Wook of the 1st Company. The lieutenant introduces himself as well, saying that the combat he just witnessed was very impressive. He hands over a card, contacts him, and asks if he would be interested in participating in the special guerrilla attack. Some soldiers are surprised to hear that the lieutenant is part of the unit. Black Tiger discusses the fact that the recruiter just offered Jun Wook a position in the top AMT unit. The protagonist apologizes and explains that he is an F-rank player, but points out that the ranks are just standards established for ordinary people, and that they need warriors like him. Inwardly, Jun Wook was extremely annoyed by the fact that everyone wanted to recruit him. The lieutenant then asks how long he will hold on to, asking if his squad should do the job instead. Sok claims that F-ranks can't even level up, so they should accept more jobs. The card. Seeing this, he concludes that he will definitely face enemy groups later on, and admits that he will keep his distance. The protagonist he hands over the card and thanks the lieutenant for his kindness, telling him he will consider the offer as he gives a military salute. The sergeant clearly observes the entire scene. Annoyed and extremely irritated, he continues to watch the two of them. A little later, we see the scene shift to the Kok Battalion commander's room in the accommodations. He asks how the Black Tigers are doing these days. The first lieutenant replies that they are always understaffed. The commander comments that the guilds, they are always poaching their best talent, whether they are from the highest ranks or even the lowest levels. Suddenly, they both exchange knowing smiles. Kok asks if he is there regarding Sergeant Jin Ho, remembering the boy's incredible talent. He confirms that the commander is right, but he has heard another rumor. Looking at him with a tense expression, he asks if the lieutenant is on leave, adding that he found a very interesting soldier because of it. Recalling this attracts the commander's attention. The former Black Tiger member continues to observe Kok, awaiting his reaction. With his arms crossed, the second lieutenant, wonders who this interesting soldier could be. The first lieutenant replies that it's Corporal Jun Wook. Meanwhile, the commander observed the protagonist running around the court as Juno tried to hug him. Xio was on the phone, asking someone to investigate the protagonist and he asks if they will take responsibility should something urgent occur while his squad is working. Some people find it funny that he's humiliating. His subordinate finally catches up, hugging him and asking him to teach him how to become stronger. Jun Wook insults the boy while trying to push him away. The boy continues to accompany him, saying he wants to be like him. The protagonist asks whoever is on the other end of the call why he wants that. He accepts the commander's mission, stating that the lieutenant should be careful. The protagonist was running in a heroic, yet extremely disastrous way. Still watching, Kok apologizes to the corporal, saying that it isn't his opinion and that it's all purely his fault for making the people so greedy, while flashing a wide and terrifying smile. In a city at night, various people were walking normally. A woman was conversing with a head chef while her son noticed something. The boy starts running, screaming that he saw a monkey. She stops in front of the alley echoed with cries for the little monkey. However, it wasn't a monkey at all, but a large, frightened mouse. The boy then realizes that it's not a monkey, but monsters. They had a pentagram on their foreheads and were turning towards the child. Much to his despair, countless monsters just like them were emerging from a portal. Meanwhile, the protagonist was surprised to see something. He was in the battalion arsenal, together with the lieutenant. Suddenly, she says that the commander believes in his accomplishments and gave him a break and a weapon, but the platoon leader doesn't believe in him. Bored, June says that in his past life, he was a slacker, and the protagonist, saying that things won't be easy for him just because he is a corporal. Looking at the extremely irritated manager, Jun Wook wonders how much apparently that hasn't changed. As he looks at a sword, he figures that whether the leader believes in him or not is of no concern to him. After all, everything depends on him anyway. In the past, even the shop assistant seems a little curious about his response. Looking at him, she asks if the corporal is really that lazy, mentioning that goblins, they had the same sword mark, meaning he stopped the first horde all by himself, and he wonders if that even makes sense. The protagonist chooses a small sword. While claiming that it's perfect for him, the boy waves the weapon around, and she looks confused by his behavior. The woman asks him not to choose just any weapon just because she's pressuring him, but Jun Wook says he really liked this one. This was the cloud sword, which had the effect of absorbing water and generating a humid fog. The protagonist admits that it seems useless now, but with this sword, John Hun became famous as the Saint of the Sword. The true name of this item is the Black Hand of the Cloudmaster. According to Dangun mythology, 3 gods of weather descended to the earth, the Lord of Wind, the Master of Rain, and the Master of Clouds. His black hand was called the Hand of Darkness. After releasing all of its marks, power, you will be able to activate the hidden swords among the clouds ability, generating powerful lightning rays. With a smile, he assumes that, therefore, with the manipulation of steel and lightning, nothing will be able to stop him. The lieutenant asks him if this old sword is not too small of a reward, considering his had failed in the past. Furious, the man asks what that look is, and if the protagonist wants to die. He extends his arm, and magic circles, but he says that he is satisfied. He begins to say that there is no time to choose anything else. Suddenly, they hear an extremely loud noise, surprising. Even with that, the control tower alerts everyone to the appearance of a portal in Itaewon. Soldiers immediately begin preparing for combat. The protagonist is not happy about this at all. Hearing this, the girl is curious as to why Junwook is so calm and unsurprised by the situation, as if he were expecting it. At the city entrance, knights are preventing people from entering. A person in extremely glamorous armor walks through the streets, accompanied by other soldiers. Some army soldiers express admiration for the presence of the Blue Flower Guild, noting that they were sent as reinforcements for that portal. They start commenting that all that armor and weaponry are products, stylized and nothing more. One of them comments that if they sold all the equipment they just saw, they could buy an entire building in Gangnam. Suddenly, an army squad appears, marching and preparing for combat. Junwook says that, as they already know, this is a cobalt portal, and even though they are small, their machete weapons are very dangerous. One of the soldiers starts rolling up his sleeves, but the protagonist yells at him, asking him not to do that during his service. Juno says that the monsters haven't even gotten there yet, and asks if they need to be so serious, but the corporal asks if he wants him to have his. Junwook's squad mates gather around him, surprised by what's happening. The man then starts to question if the boy wants to face him, eyes ripped out while he's still alive. Scared, the boy says no, and the protagonist asks everyone to check their gas masks, just in case. Emergency. While laughing, one of the soldiers approaches, saying that apparently, even the useless squad is having a strategy meeting. Juno. He feels dejected upon hearing that. Seeing his subordinate's reaction, the protagonist becomes genuinely irritated. Junwook tells the two that the kobolds have escaped from the evacuation zone and that everyone should keep their masks close. Convinced, the guy says he can handle it alone, saying that he is not someone who needs advice from people like him. The protagonist tells him not to forget that, but the guy says he understands, calling him the commander of the useless squad. His men become discouraged again. Junwook gets even more irritated with all that arrogance, and speaking to his troops again, tells them. He orders them to return to reality, explaining that it's not the first time they've heard this, but now their lives are at risk, so they can't afford to be swayed. They all agree with their commander, who informs them that the kobolds are small monsters, so they need to place these motion sensors in sewers and other narrow spaces. With that, he announces that everyone has 20 minutes to complete the task. The protagonist calls Jamo, who immediately volunteers. The soldiers begin to comment on how extremely serious and anxious the protagonist seems today. At the location where the army's supplies, claiming to be a D rank, Junwook takes a deep breath to calm down, and with a sarcastic smile, says that they will go, but asks that, we're being stored. The boy is confused, not understanding why the corporal summoned him. He silently looks at his subordinate, unsure of what to do. Juno. He asks what Junwook wants, and as he's about to answer, an arrow strikes him in the neck. A type of poison rapidly spreads through his veins, and he suddenly collapses to the floor. One of the manhole covers, where the soldiers were installing sensors, explodes. This triggers a chain reaction, causing all the other manhole covers to explode as well. The soldiers try to cover their mouths and noses to avoid inhaling the poison, just as their leader instructed. They begin to put on their masks. Various kobolds then appear to attack the soldiers, who are writhing on the ground, paralyzed by the poison. Junwook can only watch helplessly. Suddenly, a monster approaches him. It's the boss of the portal. He stares at his enemy, his pupils dilating in fear. The kobold raises a dagger, preparing to stab him. Still unable to move, the protagonist can only fording anxiety, see how his enemy tries to reach him with the blade. Suddenly, a soldier launches himself at the boss. It was Jamo, who asks if the corporal is okay, but he had been hit glancingly in one of his eyes. The boy tries to help him while the kobold watches them through the poison fog. Suddenly, the monster's mask starts burning. Gathering his last strength, the protagonist tells Jamo to run. Confused, he asks what is happening and asks Junwook to put on the mask. However, the boy is baffled. Desperate, the corporal screams for his soldier, but returning to the present moment, they be given some food first. Irritated, the man asks what he's talking about. The protagonist orders the sergeant to look around. Presently, Juno is in front of the protagonist, asking him what this is all about. Looking at the boy, Junwook tells him that, in his past life, his subordinate died trying to save him from the kobolds. Some soldiers announce that they have just installed the sensors and request more, mentally stating that the real battle of this portal will occur there, in the rear. He calls Juno by her name again. The boy asks him to give him the order, saying he will do whatever is necessary. Junwook tells him that he will send him a signal later, and after that, he must evacuate the troop members from the operational zone. The soldier feels confused, not understanding what is happening. A truck drives quickly through the streets. Frightened, Hmo asks if that isn't military desertion. Calmly, the protagonist affirms that it is not, saying that it is a military tactic. The soldiers were conducting a sweep of the city, searching for survivors and monsters. They also reported an estimated 200 kobolds exhibiting a wide range of magical abilities. The person in charge of the operation then issued the order. Responding to their leader's command, all the soldiers quickly entered the warehouse, reporting that infiltration at Point P was complete and that the training needed to be reinforced. Following this, the control tower ordered the attack squad to activate the magic circle. The squires formed a sort of cage while magic circles manifested above their heads. They found themselves surrounded by kobolds, beginning to advance on their position. Saying that people might consider it abusive. Junwook remarks that he's worried that strange rumors could ruin the bright future that monsters screamed as they surged forward to attack, a horde numbering in the dozens. Consequently, a barrage of curved weapons was launched at the squad. The leader, he ordered them to wait as the monsters closed the distance, maintaining the order until finally releasing them to attack. All the soldiers began attacking, as magic circles unleashed fire. Thanks to this tactic, they were able to incinerate a number of monsters. Just once, the protagonist continued coordinating his troop, urging them to move faster. Zones 2 and 5 already had all the sensors installed. He marked an X on the ground with tape. Lieutenant Mani approached, asking what he was doing. Junwook greeted him, explaining that he was setting up the motion sensors according to the manual and marking the location with aluminum tape. The lieutenant dismissed it as a garbage job. Members of the Blue Flower continued to prevent people from entering the city, so he ordered the protagonist to stop fooling around and just enter through a portal. From Cobalt, the guy said that the first platoon would begin the operation in 20 minutes, and that they were the support team, so their only job was to take the detoxifiers seriously. The protagonist stated that the mission was transmitted to the support squadron directly by the Vice Commodore. Somewhat uncomfortable and irritated, he said that this was serious and asked if Junwook had forgotten his place after the battalion commander showed him some. However, that grandiose image is shattered as he curses, returning to reality. He was upside down, wearing an army uniform. Awaits sang. Annoyed that his actions didn't go as planned, the man simply accepts. He says that, since it was a request from the corporal, they should eat. Gratitude. While pushing the protagonist's helmet, he said that this was just how things were in the barracks at the time. However, the protagonist stated his name. Touching his helmet again, the lieutenant stated that Junwook was the only one with actual portal experience. Annoyed, Junwook repeated his name back at him. Mani then questioned if Junwook, he dared to lecture him and ordered him to wipe that expression off his face. A subordinate rushed over, pleading with them to stop. The girl informed the leader of the second platoon that something urgent had occurred. He then recognized her as the vice platoon leader and inquired about what was wrong. The protagonist mentally assumed that was why she provoked him into coming here. She's the lieutenant's weakness. The guy then began to explain that he was there assisting the support squad. He, the scoundrel, questioned what Junwook was doing there. Sayona reported that the battalion commander was summoning Private Junwook. Even the protagonist was taken aback. With that, after some time, a red-haired woman stood atop a building, observing the city. Beside her was a sniper. They were watching two people. It was Sayona with Junwook. She was asking him not to let the leader of the second platoon affect him, but he said that he had work to do. The girl said she would finish setting up the sensors and asked him to go see the commander. The protagonist just nodded. He nodded. Observing the situation, he realized he didn't have much time left and wondered what the battalion commander wanted. A soldier approached him, as quickly as possible, but they also need to complete the task with equal speed. To the manager's discomfort, he finds himself needing to praise the protagonist's squad. She asked him if it was okay for his squad to remain there. The woman claimed it was a direct order from the commander, and also stated that being a soldier means fulfilling the orders they receive. At the temporary command post, the commander greeted Jun Wok. Both he and were looking at the crease. The confused protagonist, Jun Wok, wondered what the first lieutenant was doing there and why he was meeting with the battalion commander. The commander, he said that he would be taking the place of John Hun, who was currently on leave, and would lead the first attack platoon against the portal, which was driving him crazy. Internally, the protagonist said that he had never paid attention to her in his past life and wondered why all of this was happening now. Annoyed, he assumed that he didn't have time for that and that he needed to get organized. He called the second lieutenant. Jun Wok stated that he had only commanded the support squad since he entered the base, which would endanger the lives of the entire platoon, even within the temporary control station. Kok gave a cold look and stated that was an order. The protagonist could do nothing but lament the situation. Suddenly, Delta Team reported that the boss had emerged from the kobold nest and requested that the groups in the second and third zones remain on high alert. Worried, Jun Wok realized that his squad would soon be attacked, and if he didn't arrive quickly, the entire rearguard would be wiped out. Clicking his tongue in frustration, he decided he needed to get out of there as quickly as possible, no matter the cost. Abruptly, he told the commander, after work, Du tries to make himself inconspicuous while glancing at the others. Annoyed, the man demands to know what they're staring at and orders them to go eat, that he had something to say. Staring intently at him, Xeo ordered him to proceed. The protagonist remained silent for a moment. Yuna was still observing. The protagonist's team saw him running through the alleys, and she was confused by his behavior. He desperately ran as fast as he could. Possible. The protagonist yelled at the support squad, ordering them to put on their gas masks immediately. At that moment, the sound of automatic machinery could be heard. Sensors began to sound uncontrollably, blaring alarms. Everyone present was extremely scared. The poison, just like in his past, began to escape through the sewers once again. Jun Wok ended up trapped in the middle of the explosions, seeing everything covered by the poisonous fog. He began to lament with rage, covering his mouth and nose. The protagonist admitted that it happened even faster than he remembered, flashing back a little to the past during his place. Conversation with the battalion commander after the commander asked him to finish what he wanted to say. Jun Wok says he heard rumors that on Kok's first mission, he lost his entire platoon. The first lieutenant is surprised to hear this. The protagonist tells him that this is why he doesn't believe the commander is assigning him to be the leader of an attack platoon when he's just a corporal from the group of useless soldiers. With this, he asks if the commander considers him and the other regular soldiers as disposable. Kok claims that this is a misunderstanding and that his personal attack squad will follow him, but the protagonist interrupts him immediately. The corporal tells Juno to eat, claiming he isn't hungry as he awkwardly retreats. His partner watches him, unsure if everything is all right, saying that if it meant following an order from him, he would give his own life, even while internally conflicted. Jun Wok gets frustrated that he can't tell him what he knows. Regarding the future, the protagonist continues, stating that if he were to command a platoon other than his own, there would be a high probability of casualties. He is grateful for the expectations the commander has of him, but he will disobey if it costs his companions their lives. Xeo turns serious while remains silent. The first lieutenant tells him that disobedience during wartime is a military crime. Inside, he's screaming that he knows, but, however, if he doesn't act now, the entire rearguard will be wiped out. After a few seconds, the commander says it's all right and that he should continue with the original support mission. Even the protagonist is surprised by this reaction, but he states that he has a condition. Kok responds, acting like a true, the soldier will have to face the consequences of disobeying a direct order. Returning to the present, the area was completely covered in poison. Jun Wok was trying to locate his troop. He quickly put on his mask, and as he adjusted it on his face, he continued cursing, annoyed by his delay. Using his inventory bag, he withdrew the Sword of the Clouds. Pouring water from his canteen onto the sword, the system identifies that it has absorbed 25% of its capacity. The protagonist notices that he can't see anything due to the gas and wonders if he arrived too late. Looking through the mirror losses, Sang-wook also watches the protagonist walk away, remarking that he seems different. After creating some distance, he hides behind a wall. Jun Wook. Dense fog of poison. He mentally prays that Juno managed to gather everyone and escape. However, someone was being attacked by one of the monsters. The man screamed as the kobold's pike pierced him. He cried out to Juno for help. The boy, witnessing the scene, was shocked and quickly readied his weapon to defend at his companion while cursing the monster. The soldier shoots, attempting to draw it away from the injured man. Seeing that it was being attacked, the monster ceased striking the man and leaped into the fog. The soldier places his hand on the wound, attempting to staunch the bleeding. Juno instructs everyone to retreat behind the barricade and bring Minte with them. One of them announces that he has ensured the wounded soldier's safety. He drags Minte away, leaving a trail of blood on the ground. The vice platoon leader was in complete shock. The boy urges him to regain his composure. Observing the woman's state, he understands that it is normal. After all, she's barely 20 years old. While trembling, Janmo points out that this is also the first time she's been in a real combat situation since being approved. Assuming that he can't do anything to help his comrades in a war like this, the soldiers inform Janmo that they are running out of ammunition and that they're already down to the last magazine. Nervous, the boy starts to wonder what he should do and whether he even has a chance of surviving. At that moment, he wonders what the corporal would do in a situation like this. One of the soldiers says that Minte needs medical attention, requesting that the vice leader come to their location. He bites his lips in anger. Trying to calm him, Du says he handled it well. Remembering Précy, the protagonist admits that it was nothing compared to what that crazy man did. Starts using the inventory backpack. The troops desperately shout, reporting that they are out of ammunition. Juno had taken a hammer in his hands. He shouts, saying that now is the support squad's chance. The boy explains that kobolds are attracted to shiny things, so this will distract them and draw their attention away. He orders all platoon members to evacuate with Siona. The girl, confused, asks what he's planning. Raising his hammer, Hunmu declares that this is his order as the troop's vice leader, stating that the blue flower is outside the evacuation zone, so, therefore, when he gives the signal, everyone must run to save their lives. He acknowledges that his electrical power is pathetic, but he'll be able to use it to save the lives of those people. Determined, he runs while raising his hammer high. Seeing this, the monsters become extremely focused on the light. All the kobolds run after him, leaving. He charges onto the battlefield, yelling that this is everyone's chance and ordering them to run. The soldiers shout his name. As they watch, the monsters close in on him. Juno says that if the corporal were there, she would use his pathetic power and use him as bait. Suddenly, the protagonist's bayonet slashes through all the monsters chasing him. It was so fast that even Junmo was stunned. Balance a little. He slams his head into June. The protagonist curses, saying he heard everything. He was raising his sword when the system notifies him that his cloud was purifying the toxic gas as it spread, with a 100% absorption rate. He remained silent while using the skill. The system notifies him that he can now manipulate 1 more gram. The protagonist realizes that if he stays there fighting for too long, he still won't be able to reach his goal. That his cloud was purifying the toxic gas as it spread, with a 100% absorption rate. He remained silent as he used the skill. His sword falls to the ground, and the boy is surprised by the corporal's unexpected return. Junwok cries out his name. Juno says he was only imitating him, and that he was always surpassed by the protagonist. With a smile, he expresses his gratitude that the boy is still alive, saying that he did an excellent job. Jolmo can't bear it any longer and starts crying. The kobolds continue to advance towards them. The protagonist assumes that he is truly proud of his subordinate, and that, thanks to his incredible bravery, he will be able to enjoy this banquet with a sadistic look on his face. Junwok yells that since they prepared such an excellent meal for him, he will devour it with great desire. And hello everyone, did you like the story? I absolutely loved it. If you want to see the next part, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like, and I'll see you in the next story, friends. Looking at the system window, Junwok realizes that he has only increased by 1 gram. While collecting several spoons, he declares that he can't let the others know that he is capable of increasing his level. In the dining room, people are arguing about where the spoons are. Someone calls out to Junmu, saying that they have a problem because all the spoons have disappeared. Outside, the protagonist was eating cells, shrinking them, one after another. Junwok admits that they have the pure, admitting that his life is quite ruined. While everyone was in a rather suspicious position, their commander ordered them to turn their heads. Taste of steel. The system warns that there is 1 minute left until the metals are absorbed, and that there was an unexpected increase after the absorption of 1.25 grams. He takes his bayonet and notices that it weighs 140 grams, and if he wants to increase its weight for greater impact, he'll only be able to control one. Discouraged, he realizes that the capsules only contain 1 gram and spoons 1.25 grams. At this rate, it will take a very long time to reach his previous level. He wonders if that's the only option available to him, noting that he still has 3 days to prepare. As Lan casts a sharp glance, he presumes that he will have to defeat a level 1 boss. His backpack begins to levitate, along with his knife sheath and all of his clothes. Junwook begins to control the bayonet with his mind as an aura shines around him. Extending his hand, the protagonist smiles, saying that he will show everyone what it truly means to be a specialist. After 3 days, Junwook was in the 3rd Brigade of the 1st Battalion at Namsan Station. Specifically, he was stationed at the 5th Guard Post, accompanied by another person in the guardhouse. It was Junmu, who observed his corporal with a confused and indifferent expression. The protagonist remained distant. Junwook glanced at his watch, leaving his subordinate even more curious about his behavior. The boy commented to the protagonist that he seemed to have changed recently, as he noticed it was already 4-5 inches the morning. The corporal asked if that bothered him. Quickly, the subordinate replied that it didn't, while the protagonist checked his system. The system, instead, unfortunately, the reality was that everyone who awakened was forced to serve in the army, specifically in the anti-monster troop, was notifying him again that he could now manipulate an additional 6G, bringing the total to 1,359G. The boy was still trying to justify himself by claiming he has suddenly changed for the better. The corporal starts walking towards him, abruptly making him extremely nervous. The protagonist asks him if he trusts him. Scared, Junmu replies yes, with a cold look on his face. Junwook questions whether that's true, calling him by his name. His subordinate affirms yes again, surprised to see the protagonist loading his weapon. Suddenly, a portal opens near them, generating various monsters. They rise to their feet as they prepare to explore their surroundings. The monsters spot the army camp directly below. Inside the dormitories, the soldiers were sleeping peacefully. One of the creatures opens its mouth to scream, but a bayonet comes lunging towards it and strikes at the monster, throwing it backward. The creature falls, already reeking, to the ground in front of the gate. There stood the protagonist with his dagger. His energy formed a kind of thread that allowed him to control the knife remotely. Dozens of monsters were staring intently at him, grinning. Junwook says that he never imagined he would be happy to see them, but that he had been waiting for them for 13 days. However, something surprising catches his attention. The monster that had been attacked leans on its sword as it rises again. While manipulating his dagger, he says that he has never failed an attack, which is also known as the AMT. The protagonist was extremely irritated, wondering why he was in that position, especially since he was supposed to be humanity's last savior. Surprise, and that this is proof that he is still at level 1. He starts spinning the bayonet. The protagonist states that this is his second life, but that in reality, or repeating the same thing twice. The creature runs towards him again, as Junwook warns that if it doesn't drop something good, that goblin will really die. The creature jumps, opening its mouth wide. The protagonist easily slices off its head with the now spinning blade. The monster falls, without a single chance to defend itself. The bayonet remains embedded in the trunk of a tree. The remaining monsters are enraged by their companion's death. The creature drops a red crystal and uses its ability to levitate its prize. He says he knows the future. The man places the crystal in his mouth. Even the monsters are confused by what he just did. Chewing, Junwook comments that he recognizes that stench. Without a doubt, that is mana steel. The creatures are extremely disgusted by his behavior. The system reports that the amount absorbed in grams is unknown, and that his mana will also increase after absorption. Looking at the status window, he realizes that if he consumes every item he finds from now on, the difficulty of this life will be significantly reduced. Junwook stares at the monsters in a terrifying manner, leaving them all very confused. The protagonist removes the dagger from the animated tree and declares that his mukbang is about to begin. Going back a bit to the past, after the protagonist prepared, they were in the field, forced to remain standing under the scorching sun. There were several military trucks and weapons positioned near the soldiers. His weapon, they hear a loud roar. The corporal covers his subordinate's mouth, saying that he can feel the metal vibrating. The young man asks if he really You can feel it without even seeing it. Juno says they should report it. But the protagonist claims that no one would ever believe that an F rank could sense something they can't even see. Frightened, the young man asks what they should do. The corporal asks the boy to promise him something while he goes to investigate, telling Juno not to abandon her post and that she shouldn't report this to their superiors. Returning to the present, he was frighteningly excited, stating that if the military finds out about this, all the Draps would belong to the government. The group of monsters are heading towards him, extremely furious. Junwook launches his attack, declaring that his banquet begins now as he wades into the enemies. He manipulates his dagger, and the monsters group together, attempting to attack him. But upon hitting the ground, the protagonist managed to evade the attack. Junwook spins his dagger with a flick of his wrist, causing the bayonet is aimed at the creatures, slicing through the ankle tendons of one, immobilizing it. He severs the tendons of several monsters. To his surprise, one of them was perched atop a tree, observing everything. The monster was adorned with what appeared to be necklaces, while was clearly enraged by the situation. While some lay on the ground, unable to rise, another attempts to attack Junwook in a sadistic manner. The commander shouted, emphasizing that they were the strongest, and yet they had lost 9 cartridges. Suddenly, the protagonist silently begins to use his power. Protagonist urges them to continue shouting. Sensing an attack from another opponent, he's surprised to see he can now manipulate even more metal. He grabs one of the swords that lay on the ground. With a simple wave of his hand, Junwook deflects his enemy's attack. The monster loses its weapon as others. They close in. The creature looks frightened, trying to recover its sword, but the protagonist was already preparing to deliver a firm blow. With a single movement, he slashes the monster's neck. The corporal quickly returns to his stance. With that, the creature desperately tries to stop the bleeding. He cuts the being again, saying that this will maximize its fear. Again, a red crystal is released, leaving everyone even more horrified. Junwook shouts, saying that he died after being attacked from behind, and asks how they dare do that. Extremely furious, he declares that if anyone attacks him from behind, it will devour that monster alive once more. Everyone's hair stands on end like cats, making the protagonist realize he has instilled enough fear, causing some of them to step back. Junwook asks if they should begin with the main course. Looking at the crowd to his right, he assumes that this is a little frustrating. Turning his gaze to the other side, he wonders where he is, while the boss growls. The boy keeps trying to find him, but, however, being an intelligent creature, the chief was watching the entire battle from the top of a tree, extremely irritated by everything. This was a